It's 2022, which means another year of wedding films. And not only that, but they say that this year is supposed to be the highest amount of weddings in a season, which is really crazy to think about. But that means you are probably looking, or you know someone in the filmmaking world that's looking for gear and what to use and what's the right gear for their situation. And today, that's what I'm here to give you. Actually, 2 days ago, February 4th, I don't know what time this video is being published, marked my 5 years of doing wedding films. And thinking back and looking back on it now, I started out with a Canon Rebel and slowly progressed my way up to a 70D and then to the Sony ecosystem. And from there, it's just quite crazy to think that I've been doing this for 5 years. But you have to remember, and if you're starting out with wedding filmmaking, this takes years of accumulation. You don't just go out and spend this amount of money and this amount of investment towards gear right off the bat, unless you just come for money, I guess. But this is 5 years in the making. This is what I use and what I think is most efficient to make wedding films. When it comes to wedding film gear, I like to have one mindset, and that's simplicity and minimalism. And I hate that word's become so mainstream nowadays, but that is the overall goal when it comes to wedding films, because you're running around throughout the entire day. What's the least amount of gear that you can carry that won't break your back, but also give you the most functionality? And for me, this is the formula that I have narrowed down in the 5 years of doing this. Not only that, but for the past 3 or 4 years I've been doing it solo. I want my gear to be compatible with a second shooter if I bring them along. The best way to showcase what I'm using is by 3 different camera categories. 1 is the handheld rig, 2 is the gimbal rig, and number 3 is the backup and safety cam for the wedding ceremony. And that's just a backup camera in general. But for the first rig, handheld rig, that is my main go-to shooter. That is the A7S III with the Sigma 50mm 1.4 lens with a RODE shotgun mic attached. And this is slung over my shoulder, so it's always available during the wedding day. And a 50mm focal length is a very good general focal length to use whenever you're capturing stuff on a wedding day. And not only that, but because of 4K and everything else, like the clear image zoom, you can get around with the 50mm lens. Plus, I like the 1.4 because it's low light. The next camera rig, which is the gimbal rig, is the FX3, which I have been absolutely in love with, and the 16-35 G Master lens for versatility in the wide angle ranges. And you're asking, why don't you use this as the main shooter instead of the A7S III? Well, I love for my handheld run and gun camera to have a viewfinder, and having the viewfinder, especially on a bright and sunny day, will allow you to see the image clear so you can better compose, better expose, and so on and so forth. The last camera system is the A7IV, which is actually on the tripod recording me now, with a 25mm Zeiss Batis lens. And the reason why I use this camera setup is because it has unlimited record time, which is absolutely beautiful. It has a wide angle lens, which is great for when you're using a safety angle, especially at a wedding ceremony, so you capture everything. And just overall, it has the same picture profiles and the same color science as these 2 different cameras here, so they match up really well in post-production. So with the B and C camera, those lenses are usually mounted on the whole time, but for the A cam, for the main shooter, I have 2 extra lenses that I tend to use. It's a 70-200 G Master lens and also an 85 1.4 G Master lens, and those just come in super handy whenever there's something that's far away or you don't want to get close up to a wedding guest or the bride and groom. That lens works perfectly, those 2 different lens combinations. So now that we've talked camera gear, and that's cool and all, let's talk audio. And I adore audio in wedding films because it tells the story in a more captivating and emotional way. And I've already showed you the RODE shotgun mic, the Video Mic Pro Plus. It's an amazing ambient microphone, and it captures really good audio for just run and gun stuff. But for audio, I use 2 Tascam DR10Ls, and these things are absolutely amazing because they're just so small. They're extremely portable. You get a 4-hour battery life. With a 32 gig card, you can record till the battery dies, essentially. Overall, these have been my go-to for at least 2 or 3 years now, and I really can't go back. Next in my audio bag is an H1N, and this serves as a podium mic. This serves as an extra lavalier. It's just a very versatile tool that I can use whenever I need another piece of audio for a wedding film. And I've actually had this H1N for since I started making wedding films. It's been absolutely reliable, and I have nothing else to say about it except for you probably need one in your bag. Last but certainly not least is the H4n Zoom audio recorder. This thing is phenomenal when it comes to soundboards. You just plug it straight into any output, whether that's a sound system at a rehearsal dinner or the house audio at a ceremony if there's speakers, or even a reception with toasts and speeches. It just comes in handy. And not only that, but if you don't plug into like a sound system, you can put it on a podium, or it's just a very good ambient microphone to capture that audio. And anyways, when you've been doing this for 5 years, you see every audio output possible, whether that's a 3.5 millimeter jack, RCA, XLR, a 1/4 inch. I have every cable that you could probably think of in order to plug into the H4n, because you never know. Looking back at my notes, I totally forgot about the last piece of audio gear, and it's the newest piece of audio gear. That's the RODE Wireless GO II microphone system. And these things are amazing for commercial and corporate work, but attached to the A7IV, the safety angle during a ceremony, and putting it near the speaker system just as an extra backup is awesome. I've relied on it more times than I would like to admit, but it's just a good backup source of audio. Also, while looking at my notes, I totally forgot about the drone. That's probably one of my most frequently asked questions is, do you offer drone services? Do you fly the drone? Yes, I use a DJI Mavic Pro 2, and this thing is absolutely phenomenal. I've been using it for 3 years now. It's got 10-bit color. It has all sorts of settings. I just fly it in sport mode or even manual mode. I can't remember which mode that is, but anyways, I don't use ND filters on it just because I don't have time to fiddle with ND filters, especially on a drone, because they're not variable, but it's awesome. But I also have the DJI Smart Controller, and that's a long story of why I even own that. And long story short is I broke the other remote. That was the only thing I saw aftermarket that I could buy, so I purchased the Smart Controller. Let's talk support gear. And for tripods, I use all Manfrotto tripods with the same head, including the mount for the gimbal, and that's this Manfrotto quick release plate. And it's on all of my cameras because I want to be able to put any camera on any support system at any given time, and that works extremely well. And I like these square plates rather than the long plates. I don't know, it's just a preference. For more stable running gun shots, which is associated with camera A, is the SIII, I think that's it, SIII monopod with the Manfrotto head that attaches to every other camera, so I can put any camera on the monopod. I really like this monopod because it sort of self-stands. I wouldn't put that label on it, nor would I promise you anything. I've seen friends that have dropped their cameras completely because of it, but if I need to, I can plant that camera really fast to grab another shot, maybe with the gimbal or whatever. Anyways, I really highly recommend just wide legs on your monopod. The last piece of support gear is the gimbal. I've been through many gimbals, mostly Zion Crane, but the one I've been really enjoying most is the DJI Ronin SC. And this thing is compact, it folds up into a nice little case, and it lasts the entire wedding day without me having to charge it, which is essential when it comes to wedding films. Now let's talk lighting. And for 2 or 3 years, I didn't carry a single light with me because I just saw it as excess. I didn't see any purpose. But let me tell you, when I say this, lighting makes the difference in wedding films, especially at the reception. Filming in the dark is, even with low light capable cameras, filming in the dark just does not look pleasant. And so I, in the past 2 years, have gotten 2 or 3 lights to help brighten up the dances, help brighten up speeches, and so on and so forth. One is the Aputure 300D, and this is quite excessive when it comes to wedding films, but I just love how it will light up an exit. It will light up a dance floor, super bright. And plus the Aputure 300D also has a V-mount battery option, which is what I primarily use. So it can be completely remote, no cables attached, untethered is the word I was looking for. I love it, but it's quite excessive. If I wasn't going to use the 300D, I would purchase a 60X, I believe, an Aputure 60X. I could be wrong about that. Anyways, a spotlight or backlight is so important in wedding films, and I think it really truly makes the difference when it comes to the image at the reception or during speeches. And to help fill in this powerful light, I have 2 Yongnuo light bars, and these are more run and gun type setup. These use the standard NPF Sony batteries, and they last the entire wedding night. I've never really had one just completely go off. And they're RGB, so you can change them to different colors. They sync up, so if you turn on one, the other one syncs on as well. It's an amazing light, and it fills in the front of like an exit, so the backlight's not doing all the work and they're not just heavily backlit. And of course, I have the stands to support these 3 lights. And to wrap this gear list up, let's talk miscellaneous gear. And this is just gear either on a camera or laying around in a bag that I may need on a wedding day. One is gaff tape. You never know when you're going to need to tape something on a light stand or a tripod, or even tape an ND filter back onto a camera, which is a crazy story. Not really a crazy story. Speaking of ND filters, I have ND filters on all of my lenses. They're all variable NDs, so I don't have to switch out and change ND filters or get step-up rings. That's too much of a hassle for me, so I like to have ND filters on all of my lenses. When showing this camera, you probably saw these little things right here. This connects to a Peak Design strap that goes over my shoulder, so I can be more at the ready with the A-cam. When filming wedding days, you have to have plenty of batteries. For me, I don't like trying to find a place to charge batteries, so I just have an obsessive amount of batteries at the ready. Normally on a wedding day, 2 to 3 batteries per camera is the amount you need. Laying around in the camera bag is an air duster because you never know when dust might hit your sensor or lens. And let me tell you, when there's a piece of dust on your sensor for the entire wedding day, you're going to pull your hair out. Last but certainly not least, especially on a wedding day, this is probably the most important thing in your camera bag besides your cameras: memory cards. 1, you don't want to cheap out on memory cards. 2, this is actually a Nintendo Switch games case that holds all of my memory cards. It's quite functional. All of my cameras are set to simultaneously record on 2 cards because you never know when a card's going to go out. Plus, whenever I go to back up, I use 2 separate cards and transfer them and store them on 2 separate drives, just in case the footage gets corrupted. For the Sony A7S III, which is the main camera, I use CF Express Type A cards, so I have the full capabilities of recording 4K 120, or even the uncompressed codecs if I'm just feeling it that day. On the gimbal rig, which is the FX3, I use the V90 memory cards, which gives me full capability of 4K 120 still. And on the A7 IV, I use just standard V30 memory cards. It records 4K 24 at the compressed codec very nicely. And that's it. That's all of my gear for wedding films. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more, make sure you hit subscribe. If you have any questions about any of this gear or any questions whatsoever, leave them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer them. Anyways, guys, good luck for your wedding films in 2022.